If this week's affixes came next week to overlap with Christmas, this would have probably been the most ideal time for it to come out. But it was very generous of Blizzard to give us a week off this week, as this week's affixes are Fortified, Entangling, Bolstering. And so, Fortified Entangling is actually quite easy, but Bolstering is probably the individually hardest affix of the season. And I think that that is almost doubly true whenever you have to factor in all of the dungeons that we're dealing with this season. There are a lot of dungeons like Everbloom with the Lashers that bolster mobs. Throw the Tides, they have like Snapdragons, and they also have like the Guild Goblin mobs. Those bolster mobs. What else is like pretty bad? Wakehurst Manor, they have the Hounds in the Courtyard. Those will bolster mobs as well. And so whenever you have to factor in, there's actually a lot of pretty terrible bolstering spots this week. Most people probably aren't going to be playing too much Fortified, Entangling, Bolstering. Now, for average players, it's going to be almost whatever. If you're doing weekly 20s, it's probably still fine. It's a great week to gear alts, to cap your crests if you're doing that kind of stuff. As for like legitimate pushing, it's going to be less so. I think for high-end groups, they're also going to not be playing super often this week. Most of the high-end groups that I know are going to be taking the week off. And I mean, whenever you look at other Fortified weeks, you have like Afflicted Raging, you have Storming Bursting, you have Volcanic Spiteful. Those are all pretty easy affix sets. And so then you have a hard affix set like Fortified, Entangling, Bolstering. People are pushing pretty early on in the season compared to other seasons. And it's like, we'll show back up next week. So basically, this is your vacation week where you don't really play too much. You just kind of do like eight keys to fill your vault or whatever. And so I think that instead of complaining about bolstering, now is actually a good time to actually talk about what we've seen in the past week. So this was a Tyrannical week, and it actually has turned out to be quite interesting with what we've seen from Tyrannical. So with Tyrannical, you actually see Protection Paladin, and I kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago, start to really take a hold of the top keys. Now, you are still seeing a lot of Vengeance Demon Hunter. You're actually seeing some stuff like Bear Druid and Prot Warrior, super high-end keys. But more often than not, is actually looking to be like a Prot Paladin. If we actually filter this to tanks by 25 and up, you're seeing it's still mostly Vengeance Demon Hunter from like the 25 and up range, but the absolute world first level keys are being pretty dominated by the Prot Paladin. And this makes sense on Tyrannical. I think that in Tyrannical, it's a situation where the off-healing from the Protection Paladin that you're seeing is really, really valuable. On top of that, being able to sacrifice players, and then you have like Bop and Spell Warding for specific points. That's going to help you to be able to live the bleeding edge Tyrannical level keys. For the like, and this is like the absolute top level keys. This isn't even like average high level keys. This is like, I'm doing rank 1 level keys. For the rest of the groups, Vengeance Demon Hunter is seeing very popular. This week kind of sucks for Vengeance. Raging is not great at what they're good at. Vengeance Demon Hunter is incredibly good at, first off, living long trash pulls, so they're going to be a much better fortified tank, just more broadly speaking. But on top of that as well, Sigil of Silence and the mob control that Vengeance Demon Hunter has by itself is unmatched. And so, like, by the Silent Sigil being completely nullified by Raging, it was not an ideal week for Vengeance Demon Hunter. So you saw a lot of Prot Paladin seeing play. Prot Paladin is actually very good, I think, in like Everbloom. I think that's probably the dungeon that I would say that Paladin is the best tank in, where you're able to shield and kick the second boss pretty frequently, and you have sacrifice for a bunch of players to be able to actually do a lot of stuff. But I think this is something in this tank metagame is something that we're going to kind of see evolve over time. For the healer metagame, it's actually still been pretty diverse, where you're actually getting a lot of Resto Druid because Mark of the Wild is quite strong. You're seeing a lot more Mistweaver Monk getting play. Like you're getting more and more Mistweaver play. I think Ellesmere rerolled a Mistweaver Monk as well, and so that group with Nerf and Ellesmere, they're playing a Mistweaver Monk, and so I think that that's actually a very popular option. And then you have Disc Priest, and those are the 3 healers that are seeing the primary amount of representation for the healers in the top end. So that's not super surprising. I don't think that one of them is necessarily stronger than the others. I think that they all have, pretty distinct advantages. Mistweaver Monk is really good at single target healing. They bring Mystic Touch as well, which is great in some melee cleave comps with like a Havoc Demon Hunter and like an Outlaw Rogue. It's pretty good. Resto Druid, Mark of the Wild, insane single target damage. Quite good on Tyrannical for that reason, because like Heart of the Wild and their single target damage burst is pretty strong. And Disc Priest is like, you have a lot of disc mains, I think, in like the top end. You have AJ and Mode are the ones that I think of almost immediately whenever I think of disc mains. And they always make disc look good, but it's even already good on top of that, and that like a lot of it comes down to their ability to be able to passively do damage while they're healing. Their burst healing is actually quite good. They have, I want to say like 40-second ramp timings as well. Power infusion, while it did get nerfed, is still not too bad. 2 charges of pain suppression is also pretty strong to be able to keep your group alive. I mean, that's just kind of like the general look at what we've seen from the meta, just as a whole, where, Black Cold and Ataldazar on, at least on sub-creation, are appearing to be like the easiest level of keys. And again, it makes sense. These are pretty free timer-wise, where you have things like Everbloom and Rise being F tier. I think that I might have to like reassess in the future Tyrannical weeks how I feel about Everbloom, because I got farmed by that key this week. That key is brutal on Tyrannical. Yeah, I don't think the meta is like really shaken up too much. I think for DPS, it's more or less the same. I think you're actually starting to see a lot more Warlock at higher levels of keys, but it's like Aug, Havoc, Demon Hunter +1, and the +1 is a varying degree of what you want to play. Okay, so let's actually rank the dungeons for this week. So Bolstering is a bit complicated for what we're going to see. Entangling is more or less a non-affix in a lot of spots. There might be a couple of bosses that Entangling becomes a bit tricky on, but Entangling is generally more or less a non-affix. But I think it's only fair to actually make sure that stuff is moved down. I don't think that anything's necessarily going to be S tier, just because Bolstering does take up a lot of your time. I think Ataldazar maybe comes down to A, because like the first pull on the left and a lot of the left side trash is going to be way worse because of just Bolstering in general. There's actually a lot of routes that are pulling the Colossus mobs now in Ataldazar and going straight up the left side. And so I think that that's going to be a pretty big problem with the recount of like how much count you need in Ataldazar to even be able to time the key as well. It's a situation that, Bolstering's not necessarily going to be easy. Black or Cold, I think, the first area of Black or Cold on Bolstering, you can actually wipe to the dot. You're not going to be able to do a large trash pull after second boss. The timer is probably still free. I think it's A or B. I think I'm going to put it in A. For Darkheart Thicket, I'm thinking B or C. If you end up having bolstered cats or like a bolstered bear in the first pull, you can actually end up wiping it. I'm probably going to put C. I think the caveat with Darkheart Thicket's like the first area is going to be the hardest part of the dungeon by like a lot. Murzon's Rise, Murzon's Rise is probably the hardest dungeon this season. I think it's either C or D. I'm not 100% sure on where it's supposed to be. So Everbloom is definitely supposed to be D. It depends on if they fix the strat with the first boss on Murzon's Rise, how I feel about it. I don't think I should rank it contingent on some like cheese strategy. I think I'm gonna probably put it in D tier. I don't think that's very good. Galakrond's Fall. So you're gonna have a hard time doing like the first trash pull into the boss, so you're probably gonna end up having to do it solo. The first area of trash has mobs or two. I'm gonna go with B, I think, for Galakrond's Fall. The caveat with Galakrond's Fall is the timer's free, and you can kind of afford to get farmed by the trash. But there's a world where it's not that great. Throne of Tides is C. I think that the trash in that place, especially on Bolstering, is like a hard contender for D tier. I think this is a really bad dungeon this week. And then the Manor, I'm probably gonna put this in C as well. So you're seeing everything shift down a decent amount. I don't think that Bolstering is a particularly great affix to be looking to push keys on. I think that in general you're gonna have a much harder time. But yeah, that's this week in Mythic Plus. That's basically what we're seeing. I'm kind of interested to see how the tank meta develops. I think that's kind of like one of the bigger things. Is it going to be like Vengeance on Fortified, Paladin on Tyrannical? Is it just going to end up being like a Paladin takeover at some point, where Paladin's actually able to prevent one-shots? I think we'll see. Anyways, that's going to be it for the video. I hope to see you guys in next week's video, and I will see you guys later.